All right. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to another exciting daily vlog. This is Daily Vlog 2026, number 37, I think. Something like that. So, today, we got to talk about some Baldur's Gate news. For anyone that is completely unaware, 2 years ago, I guess almost 3 years ago now, there was this little game that came out of early access. It's called Baldur's Gate 3. Made by this tiny little studio. Nobody played the damn it. Everybody played it. It massively changed video games in general. It is considered one of the igniting factors in the idea of turn-based RPGs starting to make a resurgence. It has been it won a bunch of awards. It's a really phenomenal game. I've played it. I'm gonna let you guys know right now. I have not beaten the damn thing. Not because it's so incredibly. It's not. It's not an easy game. But if you understand D&D Fifth Edition, you can beat the game. Like it's not impossible in any way, shape, or form. If you really understand Fifth Edition, or at least the version of Fifth Edition that they use in that, they have actually quite a few really nice quality of life improvements that make Fifth Edition significantly more fun to play as a video game. I don't think all of them work very well as a tabletop game, but as a video game, it works exceptionally well. But no, it's the idea that I really, really enjoyed it, and I watched a bunch of my friends play it on stream, and then anxiety got in the way, and I got distracted by other things, and I just haven't been back to finish it. But I do have, like, my main character is a shadow monk named Aether, because of course. And shadow monks are real fun in Baldur's Gate 3. Anyway, so it was huge. It was amazing. But one of the things that kind of upset a few people was after it was finished, Larian Studios, the company that actually developed it, flat out said, we are done with Baldur's Gate. We're not going to make an expansion. We're not going to make a sequel. We had a great time doing this, but we want to get back to our own stuff. Larian was already somewhat well known for their Divinity series, specifically Divinity. What's it called? Now my brain's just gone. Divinity Original Sin. There we go. Divinity Original Sin 1 and 2, which were effectively Baldur's Gate 2.5. Like, they took a lot of inspiration from the original two Baldur's Gate games. The big difference being they were turn-based versus the real-time, like, kind of pseudo-real-time strategy Infinity Engine games that were Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. The real kind of spiritual successors to Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 was the Pillars of Eternity series, which were both exceptional, wonderful games as well. But anyway, so Larian, I want to say shortly after Baldur's Gate, and by shortly after I mean, I think within a few months of Baldur's Gate 3 finally launching out of early access, they flat out said, yeah, we're done with this. We want to go back to, things that we have more control over. And we got the official announcement of a new Divinity game coming sometime later. But we got this really awesome trailer during the Game Awards. So a lot of people assumed, now we're finding out rightly so, that Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro was not going to let all of the hype and everything just go to waste with Baldur's Gate 3, which from a business perspective is incredibly smart. Like, Baldur's Gate 3 is one of the most universally praised games that have come out in decades. Letting it just go, well, that was cool, and then forgetting about it would have been monumentally stupid. So it has officially been announced that HBO is going to be publishing is going to be creating a live action Baldur's Gate 3 TV series. And this has kind of divided the fan base for a number of different reasons. Probably the biggest reason is the thing that people loved so much about Baldur's Gate 3 was just how impactful your choices were. You could you didn't have to recruit all the companions in the game. You could kick companions out. Your choices made massive changes in how the game played. In a television show, that's just not going to be it. So the reason they liked Baldur's Gate 3 was because, well, I get to control the story, and now, that's not going to be a thing. I'm not going to be able, to rewatch it 7 different times and get 7 different endings. Whereas in Baldur's Gate 3, you could play it like a dozen different times and not get the same playthrough twice. Dozens of times even. It's an exceptionally well-made video game. So you have those people that are upset about that. One of the takes that I am 100% against. I think this is just sour grapes and, someone thinking that they're far too more important than they actually are. One of the people at Larian, apparently Michael Dowse, said that he is extremely unhappy that Baldur's Gate 3 is being turned into a TV series. And he was the director of publishing for Baldur's Gate 3, which, if you're wondering exactly what that means that he did on the game, congratulations. I think everyone else is wondering as well. But due to the job title, I can naturally assume, from my own experience in business, he probably was an upper-level manager that basically managed a bunch of different groups. And I'm assuming one of the groups that he managed was involved in the actual writing. His basic complaint is we had an entire team of writers. Apparently, there were over 2.5 million words in the script for Baldur's Gate 3, making it one of the largest games that have ever been created in the history of video games. And so his kind of commentary is there's no way that they're going to be able to do as good a job as we did, because look at all the work, and TV writers are not going to be able to do all of the research and all the different things that we did to create our amazing, wonderful game. And my response to that is, as respectively as possible, please go fuck yourself, because you guys had the chance to do something else with Baldur's Gate 3. And you said, no, we want to do our own thing. We felt too limited by using someone else's lore and having someone else get to decide what we could and couldn't do. So we're going to go back to our own sandbox, and we're going to play there, because we don't like that we don't own this sandbox. So go fuck yourself. I really don't care that you're we did such a good job. They're never going to be. Fuck you. You guys gave up on this series, which I don't actually have a problem with. I can 100% understanding, going from developing their own lore, their own world, and then having to work under the constraints, not just of a pre-written world, but under the constraints of Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast and the Forgotten Realms lore, which is extensive. There are novels, there are shit tons of D&D adventures that go back for 50 years. It's an incredibly it's an incredibly difficult thing to write for, especially when you're not allowed to contradict previous sources of lore. So it's not that I think that Larian is this horrible, disgusting group that's well, fine, screw you, I don't care if you go. No, it made perfect sense that they were going to go to go back to Divinity. Divinity is a fantastic series. It really, really is. However, you don't get to bitch and moan when you give up something and then somebody else goes, well, if you're not doing anything with it, I'm going to do something with it. It's super cool. So that particular take, I am 100% fine with saying, please go fuck yourselves. Go do your Divinity stuff. I'm sure it's going to be amazing because you guys do make amazing games. But no, you don't get to get mad because someone else is writing Baldur's Gate 3 stuff. You just don't. Now, as far as the television series itself, the TV series is actually going to be headed by Craig Mazin, or Mazin, something like that. If you're not familiar with that name, he's actually the dude that co-created the Last of Us TV series on HBO, which has met with universal praise, not just from like critics who, I'm going to be blunt right now, I don't trust most critics any further than I can throw them. They have already been shown to not actually care about quality or the things that they're reviewing. They simply care about, ensuring that they get to look as morally superior as physically possible. However, in addition to the critics absolutely adoring The Last of Us, the fans, the people that I actually care about their opinion, loved it for the most part, at least as far as I've been able to tell. The writing itself, I personally have not watched it. Not because, again, I think it's this horrible thing or anything like that. Panic disorder and horror do not go together. So despite the fact that The Last of Us is more of a drama than it is a horror, anything with jump scares and stuff like that can cause me to have panic attacks, which turn into seizures or food poisoning. Neither of which I'm willing to risk simply to watch a TV show based on video games that I've never played. Because again, jump scares and panic disorder do not mix. Or at least untreated panic disorder. So everything that I've been able to see thus far has been that everybody loved The Last of Us. I've seen clips and things like that. My understanding, the acting in it is superb. The writing was apparently really brilliant and amazing. There was a lot of really, really good stuff that happened in it. So as far as picks for the people that are effectively going to be running the show, I don't know if Craig's going to be the showrunner or... Well, here it says he's attached to create, write, executive produce, and showrun. So he's going to be wearing a lot of different hats. For anyone that doesn't understand kind of the difference there, create basically means he's one of the people that is, coming up with the overall, this is what it's going to be. Writing is kind of self-explanatory. He's physically going to be writing some of the dialogue. Executive producing in general is a weird thing. Like, different producers do completely different things, but effectively a producer's job is to ensure that the production gets done. So some producers do things like find money for the production. Other producers help with casting. Some producers help with location scouting or getting the right people. Basically, a producer is just this kind of blanket term for dude that gets shit done. And then showrunners are basically the people that are on the ground that are actually ensuring that even with the different directors that they'll be using and everything, the showrunner is there to ensure that the season all kind of fits under the same kind of umbrella. Because for people that don't know, most television shows are not like in a movie. You have a director. And that's it. You have a single director. Sometimes you'll have like co-directors, but you have this one unifying vision. When you look at television series, every episode might be directed by a different person. That doesn't happen very often, but most of the time for a single series of a TV show, you're going to have a minimum of 2 to 3 different directors. And sometimes you will have guest directors come on. Jonathan Frakes is famous for him just going to like different television shows and directing, because he started doing directing back when he was on Star Trek: The Next Generation. He directed both First Contact and Star Trek: Insurrection, and now he does significantly more directing than he does acting anymore, and he's a brilliant director. So anyway, the showrunner is basically there to kind of rein everyone in, and they're kind of the director of directors, if we do it like that. The kind of saying that I learned when I was going to acting school is in the acting world, stage is really run by the actors. Yes, you have a director that directs the show and everything like that, but because stage acting is done live, the actors get the final say about what goes on, and what the audience sees. When you get to films, it's the director. Yes, actors can sit there and kind of fight for what they want, but it's always going to be the director that has the final say of this is what the movie is going to be. So in general, in a film, the director is kind of the most important person on set. When you get to TV series, it's the showrunners or the producers that are the ones that are the most important person. Because again, directors come and go, actors could come and go, everybody else involved in the production kind of come and go, but the showrunner is there, and they are the person that you have to answer to every single time. So the fact that Mason is going to be a writer, executive producer, and the showrunner, in addition to the creator, it does give me hope for it. Because, again, one of the biggest issues that we see most of the time when Hollywood tries to adapt something that didn't originate in Hollywood, perfect example, The Witcher. The Witcher started as a bunch of novels that are beloved by people all over the world. Eventually, they got turned into a video game series where the first Witcher game was, if I remember correctly, critics thought it was pretty good, but it didn't sell particularly well. The Witcher 2 was much more popular, and The Witcher 3 was a phenomenon, and it introduced a lot of people to The Witcher. Well, the people that created the Witcher TV series could not have given a smaller amount of fucks to what The Witcher was about, the lore that had been created, anything. They just wanted a popular franchise to be able to tell the stories that they wanted to tell. And so they were going to really, they were just using The Witcher to get an audience for free that they didn't have to actually fight for. However, Henry Cavill was a huge Witcher fan. And for 2 seasons, he fought tooth and claw to ensure that The Witcher respected the source material and everything like that. And eventually it got so bad that he had to leave. And the most recent season of The Witcher, which I think is, I can't remember if it's season 3 or season 4. But the first one with, what's his face? Liam Hemsworth. Everybody hated. It was universally panned because, again, they just didn't care about the source and the source material. And we see this constantly. The Street Fighter movie from the 90s, which is a phenomenal movie to watch. It's atrocious. It is an absolutely horrible movie in every way, shape, or form. But Raul Julia gives probably one of the greatest villain performances in cinematic history. And if you're willing to accept that this is a bad movie, it is incredibly entertaining to watch. The Mario Brothers movie from the 90s, the various Mortal Kombat movies that have sometimes done good things, sometimes done bad things. The Assassin's Creed movie that was horrible. Hollywood just has this disdain for anything that they didn't create themselves, and anytime they are given control of it, they try to show how superior they are. We even see it with video game stuff. Like, how many times has a musical been adapted to film that they have absolutely butchered it because we're Hollywood. We're obviously better than those stupid stage actors who overact everything and wouldn't know how to find a sight line if it bit them in the ass. So that's been the biggest problem that we've had with anything being adapted to Hollywood in general, whether it was a television series, whether it was a movie, whatever, is most of the time Hollywood had this incredible disdain for the source material and like, well, we're better than that, so we're going to improve upon the source material. Or it's like, well, we're just using the source material because people like it and that will give us an audience for us to tell a story that has nothing to do with the source material. We're just going to adapt our story to kind of fit in that world so that people will watch it just because they like the source material. So the fact that we have someone that seems to be respective of the source material to the point that their last show that they made was universally praised by both critics and fans, it does give me some hope. However, the subject matter of what it's going to be is interesting. They specifically state this is going to be a sequel to Baldur's Gate 3. This is not going to be them retelling Baldur's Gate 3, which I think was a really smart thing to do because, again, the thing that makes Baldur's Gate 3 such an amazing game is how personalized the game is. Every single playthrough is very, very different. And you're going to have different characters that you kind of fall for and different characters that you really, really enjoy. And different characters are going to make different choices. And if they had attempted to just retell Baldur's Gate 3, I think it would have failed spectacularly. What they're claiming is Baldur's Gate 3, the TV show, is going to deal with the direct aftermath of the end of Baldur's Gate 3, which actually opens up some interesting possible story ideas. Something else that's kind of interesting, one of the consultants for the Baldur's Gate 3 TV show is going to be my personal friend, Chris Perkins. You should know that name. If you don't, for whatever reason, Chris Perkins worked for Dungeons and Dragons for decades. He used to be referred to as the DM to the stars because he would do all of these live plays and recorded D&D games with famous people. Everyone from he started Acquisitions Incorporated. He had his own show called Dice Camera Action on the Wizards of the Coast Dungeons and Dragons specifically Twitch channel that actually started out as them just playing through the Curse of Strahd module and then went crazy places. He's guest starred on Critical Role. He's run game, like he has actually DM'd for Ed Greenwood, R.A. Salvatore, a bunch of other Forgotten Realms authors. He DM'd for the Robot Chicken folks, a bunch of people from Robot Chicken. He ran them through an adventure that he created himself. Like, he really is probably one of the foremost experts on Dungeons and Dragons in the world. And he understands Faerunian lore really, really well. That was kind of what he did, was he was kind of a lore master kind of person, whereas Jeremy Crawford was more of the rules dude. Perkins was more of the lore and adventures dude. Now both of them work for Darrington Press and are doing stuff for Daggerheart, which is amazing and wonderful. So Chris Perkins is going to be on there. That's really, really cool. But what kind of stories are they going to tell? Well, according to this article from Deadline, there's going to be a combination of characters that existed in the game and new characters that are created specifically for the show. They claim that it's going to be very similar to how most of the Baldur's games work, and how D&D works in general, is you start off with these relatively weak people and you watch as they grow in their power and their maturity as they go through an adventure. So very much a D&D style story. If I had to guess, The core cast is going to be original characters created for this television show, and we're going to get cameos from people from Baldur's Gate 3, and possibly other Baldur's Gate and other Faerun related stuff. They did specifically say in the article that they're primarily going to be focusing on Baldur's Gate 3 specifically stuff, and not really taking a whole lot of inspiration from Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. What that means, effectively, is Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 form what was referred to as the Ballspawn saga. And basically what that was is the main character, who both those games were novelized eventually, and they gave an official canon name and a canon ending for Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 as far as Realms lore is concerned. So the hero from Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, referred to as the Ballspawn, or Bahalspawn, depending on how you want to pronounce it. The Bahalspawn is how he's referenced most times. The canon character is named Abdel Adrian. And spoiler alert for Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, what eventually happens, the entire point behind the Bahalspawn saga was during the Time of Troubles, which was basically this period in Faerunian history where there were two kind of levels of god. You had the higher gods and the lower gods. The thing that kind of listed who was a higher god and a lower god was this thing called the Tablets of Fate. And that was written by this supreme deity called Lord Ao. Well, a few of the deities started thinking that the Tablets of Fate were what gave Lord Ao his power. And so they decided to steal them to try and get themselves more power and a better place in the pantheon. Ao was pissed, and he said, fine, you guys want to be dicks about this? All of you are gone. You all have been kicked out of immortality, and you will be forced to wander the earth as mortal avatars. And that period in history was called the Time of Troubles. I actually made an entire video on my old collaboration channel, the All for Geek Alliance, that called it the Times of Troubles. The Times of Trouble, which is wrong. That's actually a period of Russian history. But anyway, so all of the deities got forced into mortal bodies and had to walk the world of Faerun as mortals. And it massively changed how everything worked. Anyone that had divine spells, clerics, paladins, things like that, unless they were within, I want to say it was like a mile, or it might have been 5 miles, of the avatar of their god, they lost all access to their powers. And the other thing that was really big was the gods could die. They were no longer immortal. They were literally mortal avatars. And so we saw the loss of quite a few different gods in Faerun. Specifically, 3 that were called the Dead 3, which were Bahal, Cyric, and the other one that I can't remember now. They were gods of murder, death, and Merkel, I think, was the other one. Anyway, and I think lies was the other one. Well, Bahal, being the god of murder, realized that this was a very, very bad place for him to be. Being the god of murder, you don't want to be mortal. It's a bad idea because your followers like to murder things, possibly including you. You can never tell. And so he had this brilliant idea that he would go around and just fuck everything with a womb. Or I guess it was exclusively humans with wombs, but still. He went around and just impregnated every single woman he could find. Everyone physically, he just went around and sowed his seeds so much. And then in a struggle with, if I remember correctly, it was Cyric, he gets killed. However, the reason he was impregnating all these ladies was he was literally putting portions of his soul into each one of these offspring, and they would eventually grow to become the Bahalspawn. And the whole point of the Bahalspawn is when they came of age, they would eventually get this urge to go and find each other and kill each other. And once the last one succumbed to that murderous rage, he would be turned into the Slayer, which was basically Bahal's one of Bahal's avatar forms, and that would cause Bahal to be reborn. Well, at the end of the novelization of Baldur's Gate 2, Abdul Adrian actively refuses to kill the last remaining Bahal spawn, therefore trapping the last portion of Bahal's essence inside of him with no way to come out. So he effectively stopped Bahal from returning. However, fast forward to 5th edition, after the time of troubles, we had an argument involving, I think it was Torm, who was guarding the gates to heaven, and eventually Mistra, the goddess of magic, was murdered, and that caused the spell plague to happen. Ao finally went, oh, you guys think these tablets of fate... He eventually got the tablets of fate back. He goes, oh, you guys think these are so important? Boom! He destroyed them. And that's what caused 4th edition. Well, at the end of all that, Ao decided to rewrite the tablets of fate, and the world went through this process of what was called the second sundering. And because the tablets of fate were being rewritten, all of these gods started creating started imbuing heroes with their power, and these people became what were called chosen. With the intent of, if they did enough things in that deity's name, that deity would be more famous and more powerful, and when the tablets of fate were rewritten, they would have a better chance of being in the higher echelon of deities. Well, near the end of this second sundering, or maybe nearing the start, I can't remember, but around the second sundering, Abdul Adrian still was alive. It had been over 100 years since he had kind of stopped Bahal from coming back. He had become the leader of the Flaming Fist, which is a mercenary guild in Baldur's Gate. He was part of the ruling council of Baldur's Gate, called, I think, like the Council of Four or something similar to that. And there was this big event where everyone was telling him how cool he was, and the last remaining Bahal spawn that people thought was dead, named Viken or something like that, shows up, gets into a fight with Abdel. It was actually an adventure that you could play. You can still play it now. You can buy it on the DM's Guild, called Murder in Baldur's Gate. And what happens is, depending on the choices that the players make, either Abdel will slay Viken and become the Slayer and cause Bahal to come back, or Viken will murder Abdel and then he will become the Slayer and call Bahal to come back. Effectively, Bahal is back. But the interesting thing about it, because the tablets of fate were already written and stuff like that, he's not technically a deity. He's still mortal. He just has the powers of kind of a semi-deity. So he still has to be kind of careful. So that was Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. Baldur's Gate 3, some spoilers for Baldur's Gate 3, had nothing to do with Bahal. He's barely mentioned. One of the bad guys that you deal with in there is a chosen of Bahal. But that's the most that we get into it. Bahal doesn't show up in the game at all. Baldur's Gate 3 is based entirely around Mind Flayers, or Illithid is what they're also called. And their attempt to basically reestablish what was referred to as the Illithid Empire. Long before anything else cool was going on, Mind Flayers didn't just rule the world, or they had an empire that sprawled across all planes of existence, all the different crystal spheres and realities. Like, they ruled everything. And they had this group of slaves that eventually rebelled under the leadership of this character named Gith. And Gith inspired their followers to rebel against the Illithid, and actually wiped out something like 90% of all Illithids, and they completely destroyed the Empire. And then they broke into two factions, which we'll talk about in a little bit here. You have the Githzerai, which are heavily shown in Baldur, the Githyanki, which heavily show up in Baldur's Gate 3, and then the Githzerai, which don't show up at all. And we'll talk about the difference between those in a little bit. And so the plot of Baldur's Gate 3 is effectively your character and all of the characters that you can control in the game, I believe, are all infected with Illithid mind parasites, which is how Illithid reproduce. They put this evil, like, teethy tadpole thing into your eye. It eats your brain and then transforms your body into an Illithid body. These are special tadpoles that don't eat your brain and don't... they have this kind of delayed seromorphosis, is what it's called, turning into an Illithid. And so the whole plot of Baldur's Gate 3 is you get to kind of decide whether or not you want to kind of feed into the power that this tadpole gives you and fight against the reestablishment of this Illithid empire. And in the end, again, spoiler alert for the game, in the end, you kind of get to make the choice of you can end this elder brain, which is this kind of group consciousness thing that controls Illithid. You can kill it, which will cure everyone that was infected with these mind parasites and effectively get rid of the risk of Illithid to Baldur's Gate. Technically not permanently, because there's other Illithid groups throughout the cosmos that could possibly eventually show up, but it would be kind of a permanent solution to that. Or you can choose to take over the kind of leadership position and rule this new Illithid empire that right now is centralized to Baldur's Gate, but eventually could spread further. So that's technically the world that the Baldur's Gate 3 TV series is going to deal with. And we technically don't know which ending they're going to choose. And depending on the ending that they choose, it actually opens up a lot of different possibilities for the stories that could be told. Most people will assume that the good ending, quote unquote, is the one that they will choose as the canon ending. Basically, we get rid of the Illithid, and now you have to deal with the fact that, Baldur's Gate was kind of ripped apart by the Illithid and all these other things. You kind of have to see what happens next. And that does open up quite a few different avenues for storytelling. Specifically, again, because they stated we're not going to be doing anything with Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, that probably means that we're not going to be dealing with a return of the Bahalspawn saga or Bahal in general. But we are probably going to be dealing with more Illithid and things like that. And so some of the things that could happen from that, and also the Githyanki and the Githzerai. So let's talk specifically about the Githyanki and the Githzerai. What's the difference between the two? Well, it's mostly philosophical. They're both technically the same quote-unquote race. They're both Gith. And the name of the race technically isn't Gith. It's just the actual name of the race has kind of been lost to history. Yankee basically is translated to followers of Gith. Again, the original slave that kind of rose up against the Illithid Empire was this slave named Gith. And so the Githyanki named themselves after the fact that they devoted themselves to following Gith. Well, after Gith was able to overthrow the Illithid and, again, wipe out like 90% of the Empire, Gith kind of went mad with power and went, no. Because after everything was done, the Gith and the group that would eventually become the Githzerai said, hey, we did it. There's no way that they can do this again. We can now, go back to, bettering ourselves and creating a civilization for ourselves. And Gith went, no, there is a huge power funnel here. There's a huge, gap in power because we've just taken out the biggest, baddest group in existence. We're going to take over everything and we're going to rule existence instead of the Illithid. And so the Githzerai are a very militaristic, expansionist society where their goal is to eventually get the Githzerai to rule over what used to be the Illithid Empire. They want to rule everything. The Githzerai, on the other hand, don't like this, and the translation of Githzerai is effectively against Gith. So again, that's why we don't actually know what the race is called. They're both based on their philosophy. So the Githzerai actively are trying to improve themselves. They are a race of monks. Like Githzerai monks are really, really common because it involves introspection and kind of honing your own abilities. And they are very much against the Githyanki. And they come into conflict constantly because the Githyanki want to control everything, and the Githzerai want to avoid having another Illithid empire, any empire like that. They don't believe that much power should be held by anybody. So now that the Illithid have basically been taken care of, it's very possible that the Baldur's Gate 3 series could involve the Githyanki kind of getting more active and going, now that that's done, let's take over this bitch. And we could finally get introduced to some Githzerai who would show up to go, we have to stop these people, because just because they're not Illithid does not mean that they're not bad. And it does not mean that it's having them rule over everything is going to be any better than the Illithid ruling over everything. Like, we need to deal with this. So I think that could be a very, very interesting story to deal with. On the other side of the coin, they could quite literally be dealing with the aftermath of all this stuff, being finished. It's a kind of story that doesn't get told a whole lot, but I think it's a really important story. Is what happens after the adventure is over. The world, especially Baldur's Gate specifically, has been rocked by what happened here. And so it could involve the rebuilding of Baldur's Gate and the surrounding areas, and kind of dealing with the massive amount of mistrust that would have been created by this thing that effectively meant that you couldn't trust your neighbors because you could never be sure of who was already infected with one of those parasites until they went through instant seromorphosis and turned into a mind flayer right in front of you. So that could tell a very interesting, very kind of character-driven story of how does the world go on after the end of the world is stopped. So that in and of itself could be very interesting. The other thing that's touched on in Baldur's Gate 3, but not really expanded upon very much, involves the character of Karlach. Karlach is a tiefling that was fighting in this thing called the Blood War. The Blood War is this giant war that's happening in the first level of hell called Avernus. And the thing about Baldur's Gate 3 is, lore-wise, it actually happens fairly soon after one of the published adventures called Descent into Avernus. And the plotline of Descent into Avernus, again, spoiler alert if you don't want to find out about an adventure that came out in 2019. The plot of Descent into Avernus is you actually start off in Baldur's Gate, but to the east of Baldur's Gate, there is a city called Elturel. And Elturel is very well known for a number of different things, probably the biggest of which is they have this giant crystal that floats above the city that shines this light that kills undead. And they have this group of knights called the Hell Riders, who specifically go out and kill undead and demons specifically. What happens about 50 years before Descent into Avernus is some dude that I can't remember his name makes a deal with Zariel, who is a fallen angel kind of character that's fighting in the Blood War, that basically says, hey, I need a lot of power. And so the deal that he makes with this character, Zariel, is I'll give you what you need to do what you want to do, but in 50 years, Elturel is mine. And he goes, cool, I'm fine with that. So what happens right before Descent into Avernus happens is this dude returns to Elturel, detonates effectively this kind of interdimensional bomb thing that sucks Elturel into Avernus. And basically the pact that was made was Zariel would get not only the city of Elturel, but also all the people in Elturel would fight on her side in the Blood War. And that was kind of the whole purpose, is she would just get this incredibly powerful army to fight in the Blood War. If you play through the adventure, eventually what happens is Elturel is transported back to... and for most of the adventure, Elturel is just suspended in the sky above the plains of Avernus, constantly being attacked by devils and demons, and it's a really, really cool adventure. It's kind of like Mad Max-esque because there's all these like death machine vehicles that you get to play around in. It's a cool adventure. So it is eventually brought back, but one of the repercussions of that is all tieflings are kicked out of Elturel because of their kind of relationship with devils in general. Despite the fact that most tieflings, the way that tieflings work in Faerun is basically somewhere in their familial line, somebody made a deal with a demon somewhere. And that got, spread through reproduction, the things like that. So the vast majority of tieflings have nothing to do with the plains of hell or anything like that. It was something that ancestors did, 7, 8 generations previously. But they look like demons, and so, like all good societies, they just found the people that were easiest to pick out of a crowd, blame them for all their problems, and then punish them for things that they had nothing to do with. It's really, really nice that only happens in fiction, and that has never happened in the real world ever. Anyway, so again, Elturel is one of the closest cities to Baldur's Gate. It's like a week or so to the east of Baldur's Gate with a road that connects directly to it. So, with the fact that Karlach was heavily involved in the... Karlach and Will, technically, were both heavily involved in the Blood War. And the Blood War was a background aspect of Karlach's character that you kind of have to deal with her relationship to it. But the Blood War's not done. So another plotline that might be dealt with in the Baldur's Gate TV series is, well, what's going on with the Blood War? Karlach and Will were able to get, dealt with, depending on what choices that you made involving them. They were able to deal with their parts of it. The Blood War is still going on. Elturel is still recovering from the fact that the entire city was exploded into a different plane of existence for a little while and then shoved back into the hole that they created when they were ripped out of there. And they still have scars from that experience. And demons and stuff like that adore the prime material plane, and devils and demons love fucking around with the prime material plane. So we very much could see a major plot being, okay, again, there's now a power vacuum that these massively powerful, influential characters were all involved in this Illithid uprising. And now they're all gone and dealt with. So now there's this huge power vacuum. So we might see that coming in. Another thing that is relatively common in Faerun in general, on the Sword Coast, which is where Baldur's Gate is, there are 3 major cities. To the south, there's a city called Waterdeep. Waterdeep is exceptionally well known in Faerunian lore. There's a dungeon beneath it. That there's actually a tavern in Waterdeep that has this massive hole in the middle of the tavern that leads into Undermountain, I believe is what the dungeon's called. And so adventurers come from all over Faerun to come to Waterdeep so that they can go into Undermountain, do their adventuring thing, come back with riches and stuff, and immediately be in a safe location. As long as they can get back to that tavern, they're safe, and they have a place to sell all their shit. So Waterdeep is run by a council of lords. And when bad shit happens to the Sword Coast, Waterdeep likes to get involved. To the north, you have Baldur's Gate kind of in the middle. It's not technically directly in the middle. It's a little bit more south. But it's in between Waterdeep and the city in the north called Neverwinter. During the Spell Plague, during 4th edition, Neverwinter got fucked. Completely. There's a mountain next to it called Mount Hotenau. It erupted and caused the river that ran through Neverwinter. Neverwinter is referred to as the Jewel of the North because it had a natural hot spring that ran through it directly from Mount Hotenau, or heated by the volcano Mount Hotenau. And that made, while everything else was very, very cold, Neverwinter was actually very temperate and beautiful. Well, Hotenau erupts, actually destroys parts of the city, and then the Spell Plague happens. And due to the eruption of Mount Hotenau, there was this area directly underneath Neverwinter, in the Underdark, underneath Neverwinter, that was a plague land that exploded. And so now there's this giant canyon called the Rift in Neverwinter that took out most of the expensive parts of the city, fell into this plague lands. Where magic didn't work the way it was supposed to and creatures got mutated. Well, the Spell Plague is over. All that stuff is gone. But there's still this massive, massive rift in there. So what happened was one of the masked lords of Waterdeep, a gentleman by the name of Dagult Neverember, decided that since the ruling family of Neverwinter was gone, he was going to move up to Neverwinter and take it over. And he started rebuilding Neverwinter. So you have Dagult Neverember in the north dealing with all the nonsense that's been happening with Neverwinter. You have the Mass Lords of Waterdeep that are, doing their stuff in Waterdeep and stuff like that. You've got, what is it? I think Luskan is to the north, I want to say, which is its own country. And then is to the south, or maybe Baldur's Gate is in the south and Waterdeep's in the middle. I can never remember which one. Let's look before I say the wrong thing, after I've already said the wrong thing. Sword Coast map. Give me a map of the Sword Coast. Okay, so there's Dragonspear, there's Baldur's Gate, and then to the south. Yeah, Waterdeep's in the middle. I'm sorry. Baldur's Gate's in the south, Waterdeep's in the middle, Neverwinter's in the north. That makes more sense. So yeah. So to the south of Baldur's Gate is the country of Amn. And you could deal with that nonsense, but they probably won't because Amn was a big part of Baldur's Gate 2. You have Waterdeep, which is north of Baldur's Gate, and the Mass Lords of Waterdeep like to deal with, shit like that. You have Neverwinter in the far north that has all these things. Then north of that is Luskan, and then north of that is Icewind Dale. So we could see those power vacuums starting to be filled by starting to be kind of filled by groups of power that kind of already exist. And there might be other things too, like in Waterdeep, Xanathar, who's a beholder that runs a thieves guild, might want to get a presence in Baldur's Gate or other, shit like that. So it does leave a lot of stuff that could happen as a direct result of this stuff being done. Now, on the other, other side, what if they choose to decide that the canon ending is the quote unquote bad ending? What if they decide that the ending that they want to deal with is when the player character chooses, no, I am going to rule, and creates their own Illithid empire that's starting in Baldur's Gate. And then we could effectively have the new characters that are created for this series effectively be the resistance against what used to be the leader. And technically, the player character, they might choose that the Dark Urge, if you're not familiar with that, one of the characters that you can start as, instead of building your own character, you can choose to play as what's called the Dark Urge, which is canonically literally that. It is this incredibly evil, dark character that when you choose that as your starting character, you actually get different options for things you can do. Like in the very beginning of the game, when you first meet Gale, who's one of my favorite characters. Gale and Will were my two buddies. Loved him to death. My party consisted of my Shadow Monk. I had Gale, which I turned him into an Eldritch Knight, because I thought that was super, super fun. I had Will as, if I remember correctly, I had him as a, what's it called? The Warlock, Spellblade Warlock. I can't remember what it's called right now. But I had him as a Blade Warlock. And then I turned the girl. I can't remember her name now. The priest, the cleric of Shar. I turned her into a paladin because she just looked super badass as a paladin, and so that was my character. Those are my favorites. But if you play the Dark Urge, when you first meet Gale, he's stuck basically inside a wall because it's a teleportation wall, and he kind of got stuck in there. And what you're supposed to do is you reach your hand in and you pull him out. That's what you're doing in the normal play. If you're doing the Dark Urge playthrough, when you reach in, you can decide to rip his arm off and leave him in there minus an arm, effectively killing him. So theoretically, they could choose that the Dark Urge was the main character. And so the Baldur's Gate 3 series could be, all right, the bad guys won, now what do we do? And that would be an incredibly fascinating TV show. It would have kind of similar feelings to The Last of Us, and the idea that you live in this world where, you know, evil has won and you have to kind of survive against bad things. And it would have kind of a rebellion kind of feeling to it because the people that are in power are the bad guys. I think that could be an incredibly interesting television series. I think it would piss off quite a few people because they get mad at the idea that their particular story was not chosen as canon. I don't know anyone that played the Dark Urge as like their first playthrough, because it's a rough playthrough. Like, you are genuinely the most evil person that has ever existed. So I don't know too many people that are like, oh yeah, love me my Dark Urge stuff. So I think if officially that was decided as the canon ending of Baldur's Gate 3, I think some people would get upset, but I think for a television series, that would be incredible. And it would be, like, I would watch it. I think that would be really, really interesting and fun. And it would give reasons, in the Deadline article, they specifically mentioned that the showrunner is not just interested in having the voice actors be involved, but he's actively trying to find ways that they can be involved. I don't know if it would be them actually playing their characters or if they would just have cameos other places. But the intent is to have some of the companions from Baldur's Gate 3 show up in this series. Not as main characters as far as I can tell, but for them to show up. And so I think it could be a really, really interesting story for effectively the person that they fought alongside becoming the bad guy, and some of them staying with him for whatever reason, and some of them getting away. And so every so often you might have to, I need to remember all these people's names. BG3 companions. What are their names? All right, so Shadowheart, that's her name. I love Shadowheart. I can't remember her name, but I love her. So I think it would be really, really interesting for you to show up, you know, for these characters to show up as kind of fighting against this oppressive regime. And, you know, maybe Astarion stuck with the Dark Urge because the parasite made it so he wasn't hurt by sunlight anymore and he didn't want to lose that power. And so maybe Astarion's with him, but maybe Gale isn't. Or Shadowheart became, you know, his kind of second in command while Lae'zel is fighting against him or something like that. And so you could have this kind of interesting thing where, yeah, these characters would show up. Some of them would be good and some of them would be bad. Like, in my personal opinion, I think that would probably be the most interesting story. Do I think it'd be the best ending to Baldur's Gate 3? No. I like the good guy ending. And again, I think there's a lot of cool stories that could be told with the good guy ending being the canon ending for this television show. But just that idea, to me, sounds really, really cool. Anyway, interested to hear from you guys. First of all, are you guys excited about the Baldur's Gate 3 TV show? Are you hesitant? Are you very much against it? You think that the TV show is going to ruin it? Let me know in the comments down below. And then, what do you guys think the canon ending is going to be for the TV show? Do you think they're going to go Dark Urge, or do you think they're going to go Good Guy? Let me know in the comments down below. Otherwise, again, that's all for me today. I will see you guys next time. All right? Bye-bye.